Okay, so my previous video shut off. I don't know why, but I was pretty much complete in telling you some of the materials that you could find around your house or at Walmart or Dollar General that you could pick up to complete this lab. So for this little portion of the lab, what I want to show you is some things that the lab tells you, but may not be perfectly clear in your mind about what to do. So for this setup, I have, you can see the plate that I talked about before, and the thin layer of water is already in here at room temperature. And then my ruler placed on top of my white piece of paper so that I can get a good visual of it. And then I also have a stopwatch here. And you'll need a stopwatch or a clock of some sort so that you can keep track of the time intervals that you have. So when you do your setup, similar to this, what you'll want is, if you notice here, I've placed the ruler so that the 10 is relatively close to the center of the plate. And it shows you on the second page of your lab in the experimental setup in figure 2.1 that you want to position the drop such that it's on the edge of the ruler or the protractor. And the reason for this is because if you place your dot, say here, and then you wanted to track the radius or the diameter of the circle, by the time the food coloring reached your ruler, the diameter at that area would be difficult to tell because you would be making a reading out here on your ruler instead of actually on your ruler itself. So as long as your surface is flat and the food coloring you put in is put in precisely on the edge of the ruler, you should get a fairly accurate reading of what your diameter is. So again, in the lab it says you're going to make measurements of the positions of the left and the right edges of the ink drop at 15-second intervals for the first 2 minutes, which means for the first 120 seconds on your timer, you're going to be taking measurements. And on the first page, you'll see that there is a little table like that you can use in order to measure or to make your measurements, to document your recordings or whatever. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you kind of how you'll start. So it says, carefully place a small ink drop near the middle of the petri dish over the edge of the ruler as shown in figure 2.1 and start timing. You need to center the ink drop on the edge of the ruler so that it measures the diameter. Again, if I place a drop somewhere up here, we're going to get a very poor reading for a diameter. It would be very difficult to tell what the diameter of it is over a certain amount of time. So you'll want to make sure that the drop coming out of your dropper is also a very concise, compact ink drop. If it's not, you're going to end up, say you do 2 drops, you may do 1 drop here, and as you're pulling it away, you get another drop off to the side. You're going to run into issues where the parts of the first ink drop will run into parts of the second ink drop, and your readings will become skewed. Again, make sure your water is room temperature, because if it's not, you'll have convection currents in here, which is asked later on in the questions. You'll see it talks about what happens if the water is too cold. Okay, so what I'm going to do is try to hit the start and drop a drop around the 10 millimeter mark on the edge at the same time. So what you'll want to do is something similar to this. Now, that wasn't the perfect drop. And in the perfect world, if I was doing this experiment for myself, what I would do is I would dump this back out and pour the water out and redo the experiment, making the water back to room temperature, because my goal would be to have the best drop possible. It's not the worst drop, but as you could tell in the very beginning, it wasn't the best drop either. But it was on the side, and you are getting a fairly decent reading for the diameter. However, I really didn't drop it in the right place either, because the diameter is a little bit off. But for all intents and purposes, you guys will get the idea. And that's what you're going to do. And use this timer, again, to make your recording. So for the first, again, ink drop at 15-second intervals, you're going to find the diameter for the first 2 minutes. And then after those 2 minutes, you're going to make observations every 30 seconds. And then you're going to continue until you reach at least 180 seconds, which is 3 minutes. After that, you're going to make a graph of the ink drop diameter versus the elapsed time. And if you need instructions on how to draw graphs, they are given in the introductions. So just draw a smooth curve through the data points. So that's what you'll do. And you can see that this is still continuing to spread out, and we're at 1 minute and 30 seconds. So that's it. Thank you. Bye-bye.